Hello, my name is John. Welcome to Adventures in Miniature. This is my teeny tiny hobby room, and today we're going to be painting up this miniature in the order of the argent shroud. Let's go! I'm starting out by priming the main pieces black to get them ready for an undercoat of Pro Acryl Dark Silver. I've been a bit wary of doing metallic armor in the past because I was worried it would look boring, but it's important to try new things in order to learn. I'm putting this layer on quite quickly as there really isn't any need to be careful at this stage. Once all of that lovely silver is on, it's time to work on the inside of the robes. I want to get these done as soon as I can so I can get the legs and body mounted to the base. I'm using Rhinox hide as a base coat for the red. For the outside of the habit, I ended up using Xandri dust with the aim of highlighting up to Wraithbone. My other option was to use Grey Seer, which would have brought me much closer to a white, but I thought it was a little bit too close to the silver colour, and I figured that white cloth in 40k would never stay white. I'm going to let that dry and go back to the inside with Khorne red, and then returning to the outside to put on what felt like 20 layers of Shapti bone. I'm trying to keep the deepest recesses a little darker, but I'll be the first to admit that this could have gone a lot better. Not to worry though, I'm sure the weathering will forgive all sins. I'm alternating going back and forth between the inside and the outside of the robes, as by the time I've finished one side, the other is ready for the next layer. I've brightened up the inside with some Mephiston red. What with this area being for the most part hidden, I'm not feeling too much pressure to make it perfect. But I like to use it as an opportunity to practice blending my highlights. Now that both sides have two tones on them, I'm going to make a glaze for each one. My hope is that this will help me tie the two colours together a bit more smoothly. It worked okay for the tan colour, but I think it came out much better for the red. Now the glaze is going to take a while to dry, so I'm using that time to start my base. I'm using some PVA glue to stick down a few bits that I think would look good. I've got a piece of a fleur-de-lis that I made out of a cake mould and some polyfiller. And then I'm putting down a thin layer of mixed flock to make sure the base has a bit of texture. I'm going to set that aside to dry properly and go back to the robes. I'm putting on the next highlight colour for the inside, which is Evil Sunz Scarlet, and that's going on the most prominent folds of the cloth. And then I mixed a little Flash Gitz yellow to create a nice orange for the final highlight. I've been keen to use this more often as I've seen it done all the time, and applying it in relatively low stakes areas has really helped me to get to grips with how I want to use this in my final highlight. In the end, I'm quite happy with the result. Next, I wanted to brighten up the silver on the armour. So I'm going to dry brush on some lead belcher, which helped put a bit more of a polished shine onto the armour pieces. While I've got it on the brush, I'm also going to get the metal details of the bolter. Another trip back to the base, this time to coat it with a layer of Mod Podge mixed with black paint. This was to make sure everything was sealed in and to protect the plaster, as it drinks paint and it has a tendency to crumble on its own. I'm using Dark Reaper to go over the joints in the armour and convey something of an undersuit. Once that's done, it's time for the corset. I normally do this in brown, but I wanted to try a different colour today. So I put on a base of Incubi Darkness, which has a really pleasing dark blue. While that dries, I've gone back to the base to lay on some texture paste. I've also taken the opportunity to place some bits of bark I found walking home, and a little orc skull from the Citadel's skull box. Incidentally, if you're thinking of a gift for someone in this hobby, a box of skulls would probably go down really well. Time to glue in the other leg, and she's ready to base. I ended up spraying the base with an Army Painter Light Tan. In retrospect, it was a bit too bright, but not a disaster. A bit of Thondia brown for the earth, and black to base the bark to create some stone effects. For the stone parts, I started with a coat of Mechanicus Grey, and then dry brushed on some Grey Seer. After mounting the model, I'm coming back to the corset. I'm using Dark Reaper to highlight up the raised areas where there might be more wear. Then a little bit of Thunderhawk Blue for the final highlight. It's a bit of a shame to hide it all later with the gun, but it is good practice. Next, it's on to the little details like the clasps and the piping of the armour. I'm using Pro Acryl Bright Gold for this. I found this to be a really good consistent colour. I use a lot of Games Workshop paints because they're the most readily available, but the Pro Acryl Metallics are absolutely worth the effort to get hold of. Next up, it's time to get the white details based in Grey Sear, which I found is an excellent colour to build up a white from. A quick coat of Corn Red to sort out the bolter. I actually much prefer the red bolters over the new Blactical look. Follow that up with some Mephiston Red. It's time to pick out the studs on the robe with some Pro Acryl Bright Silver. I'm using the same silver to run over the edges of the armor and add a subtle highlight to the rounded surfaces of the plates. I actually really enjoyed this part, even if it is only slightly brighter than the lead belcher. I'm also going to use this to bring down some of the gold ornamentation and give it a slightly more worn look. I thought the beads might look better in a more natural wood colour this time, so they got a quick pass of Rhinox hide. Instead of a wash, I'm using some contrast black Templar on the collar pipes. When it dries, it should leave a darker black in the recesses than I would get from a wash. I originally did the studs in Castellax Bronze, but quickly changed to Brass Scorpion, which gave me a much brighter finish. Finally, the arms go on, and I feel like I'm almost done. The backpack was fairly simple, Brass Scorpion for the studs, and then bright gold for the details on the top. It's only now that I noticed I forgot to do all the little blinky lights and screens. I like doing them, but it's taken me a week to notice them, so perhaps it's not that important. While I've got the gold out, I'm going to touch up a few more details on the backpack and then the shells in the bolter magazine. Back to the white details to highlight them with a tiny bit of titanium white. With the Grey Sear as a base, I only really need one quick pass across the topmost edges to get the effect I'm looking for. With the backpack on, it's time to tackle the dreaded face. I'm starting with Bugman's Glow before basing the hair in Rhinox hide because we're going brunette today. While that dries, I'm going to use some Typhus Corrosion on the armor to suggest some battle damage and wear. I'm using a little bit of Grey Sear to fill in the damaged spots in an attempt to make it look like chipped paint. Back to the hair, this time with layers of Scarag Brown. I've tried to leave the eyes in the original base coat of Wraithbone. For the skin, a layer of Kislev Flesh followed by Reichland Flesh Shade to smooth out the colours a little. Then a quick highlight with Flayed One Flesh, and onto the body it goes. A touch of Lead Belcher along the edges of the bolter, then a few grass tufts to give the base a little life, and we're done! I actually really enjoyed this colour scheme a lot more than I was expecting. The robes were a little frustrating, but I think the silver armour came out fairly well. I've been enjoying trying out new ideas for the bases, as I always find them quite intimidating. This one painted up really quickly, although there were a few details I skipped. I was pretty happy with the end result. I was worried the silver would look boring, but I'm pleasantly surprised with how it came out. So, that's us done for now. I hope you got something out of it. Please feel free to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.